Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once again for the Shangshung School of Tibetan Medicine webinar series. On our show, we explore Tibetan medicine's contribution to the greater conversation of global public health today and its role in the rich cultural heritage of traditional healing arts and science from around the world. To learn more about our school, our upcoming programs, and new content, please do join our email list. We'd love to connect with you on Facebook, and you can check out our archive episodes on YouTube or our website. And so we would love to collaborate with you. And thank you for joining us. On our show this week, we welcome an internationally celebrated teacher and best-selling author, Vivian Dittmar. Vivian is the best-selling author and founder of the nonprofit Be the Change Foundation, an organization offering educational events to raise awareness of ecological and social justice issues. Vivian shares tools for the cultivation of emotional intelligence, inner wealth, and global evolution. Her work explores topics including holistic health, social justice, equitable global economics, environmental healing, and more. And Vivian has authored several books, including The Power of Feelings, a practical guide to emotional intelligence, and Your Inner GPS, Finding Clarity with the 5 Disciplines of Thought. Vivian, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm very excited to be here. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, our ongoing host, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, is a practitioner and teacher of traditional Tibetan medicine with over 30 years of experience. Menpa Wangpo is the director of the Shangshung School of Tibetan Medicine and the co-founder of ATMA, the American Tibetan Medical Association, which is the Tibetan medicine professional organization here in the United States. Thank you so much for hosting our webinar today. Menpa Wangmo, how are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Wonderful. And as always, I am your moderator today. My name's Adam Okerblom. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, teaching and practicing traditional Tibetan medicine. So thank you all for joining us. We hope everybody's doing great. So Vivian, thank you for being with us. So how are you today? You're joining us from your home in Germany, no?
Yes, in the south of
Excellent.
Germany.
Excellent. Wow. And how is everything? How is your season progressing?
Actually, I must admit, I'm really enjoying the quiet of the winter, the nature. We've had a lot of snow and sunshine, and it's been a blessing. So, especially in these times when a lot of people are struggling, I count myself particularly fortunate to just feel blessed and enjoying this sense of quiet that comes with us with quite a strict lockdown. That's where I am, and at the same time, I feel really connected with a lot of what's happening in the world. I feel it's a great time of transition and upheaval, and I'm really extending a lot with my heart and my consciousness to embrace also the challenges that are there, and I feel really connected with that at the same time while feeling really blessed and peaceful. That's where I am.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like your home is a beautiful place to kind of be weathering this pandemic and having a lot of natural beauty and a lot of kind of introspective time. And with us coming out of the winter season, I'm sure you've had a really kind of introspective, kind of grounded experience. But at the same time, like you mentioned, since we have technology, we can connect with the greater world and explore a lot of connections there too. Well, we're really happy to have you on our show today. So, Vivian, in your work, you delve a lot into the mechanisms of human emotions, talking about what is the nature of our feelings and where does this come from, and then what is the function of our feelings and how can we kind of use sort of that to kind of change our mental state and benefit our condition. And so you're talking about these characteristics of emotional health, or emotional intelligence, or I believe, as you have called it before, emotional competence.
Mhm.
So could you please just kind of start our conversation by telling us a little bit about describing this state of emotional health? And, maybe we should start with, in Tibetan medicine, we often start the teachings with an explanation of what it means to actually be healthy. What is the
Mhm.
nature of
Mhm.
health itself? Because sometimes in modern culture, in a Western modern medicine, we don't really have this theoretical framework for, like, what does it mean to be a healthy
Mhm.
human? What is that? So we like to start with that sort of thing. So maybe you can tell us, what is your impression and your definition of emotional health and being healthy with your feelings?
Yes, sure. I find myself smiling because that was one of my deep research questions as I started to explore the subject of feelings. And I noticed exactly what you mentioned, that we have a lot of ideas about what is not healthy emotionally, but I couldn't really get a clear picture of what it means to be emotionally healthy. And it took me many years to arrive at a definition that I really felt, okay, this is true. And I noticed it's been ringing true for a lot of people. And one of the biggest discoveries for me was that emotional health doesn't mean you only have positive feelings. And that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that people face. I think that we are, as a culture, in Europe and also in the US, very much biased towards positive, good feelings, which basically means we want to be happy all the time. And we don't want to have all the other feelings, which is natural and human. And at the same time, these so-called negative feelings, they have a purpose. So for me, the greatest discovery was that so-called negative feelings have a purpose, and that all our feelings can show up in healthy and unhealthy ways. So, for example, a feeling such as anger can show up in as a powerful positive force in the world, or it can show up as a highly destructive force in the world and in our lives. And the same goes for sadness, the same goes for fear, the same goes for shame, the same goes for joy, actually. So for me, emotional health means that I am able to experience these 5 basic feelings that I just mentioned. So anger, sadness, fear, joy, and shame. These are the 5 basic feelings that in my model are the emotional compass. You're able to experience those 5 feelings in a healthy and mature way. So meaning that you have them appropriately, so they're not too intense for the situation at hand, and they are also the right feelings. So what does that mean, the right feelings? It means that each feeling has a different purpose. So anger is a very different energy from sadness, and it has a very different purpose. Now, most people don't know that, and we always create the wrong feeling at the wrong time and the wrong intensity. And then we refuse to feel it, and then it ends up as emotional baggage, and then we get all stuck and often end up getting sick, even emotionally or physically. So it's the ability to have all these feelings in a healthy way. It's the ability to recognize when what we are experiencing is a genuine feeling. So what I mean by that is a sensation or an emotional response that arises in this moment in response to what is now. So let me give a simple example. I come home and I notice my husband didn't do the dishes, even though it was his turn to do the dishes. And one possible response to that might be anger. Now, if that's a mature anger, that'll be just enough to go and talk to him about it in a way that is clear and appropriate. So I'm not going to offend him. I'm not going to have a temper tantrum. I'm not going to throw the dishes against the wall. But it gives me the energy to address the issue. Or it might also give me the energy to just do the dishes myself, depending on where I choose to direct that anger. But if I have an issue with not being heard, with other people not doing their part, because already when I was growing up, that was my issue, and I have emotional baggage with that, I'm going to have an emotional reaction that's not appropriate to the situation. And that's what I call emotions. So feelings in my terminology is the reaction arising in the moment in response to what is right now. And emotions is the terminology I use for emotional baggage, old stuff. And the ability to distinguish between the two is a key, like a key aspect of emotional health, because then I can deal with each appropriately. And if I am not able to distinguish the two, I might have an emotional reaction that comes from my past, and I might go and shout at my husband for not doing the dishes. And that can create a lot of turmoil in our marriage and a lot of pain in him and a lot of disturbance. And what I really need to do is I need to address the emotions that are triggered in my system. I need to take responsibility for them. I need to take time to heal them, and we can talk about that later, what that means, before having a conversation with my husband about the situation. So those are some aspects of emotional health, the two most important ones. Other aspects include the ability to shift from a negative expression of a feeling to a positive expression. So when I find myself like in the shadow expression of anger or of sadness or of fear, that I'm able to shift it to a positive expression. That's pretty advanced though, like not a lot of people are able to do that at this point. Like if we just talk about like the average development where we are culturally. And also the ability to have compassion for others who are suffering from emotional turmoil, and thereby helping them to work through their, to heal whatever they're currently experiencing. That for me is also a very important aspect of emotional health. So those are some key points. Let's start with those.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So in your model, then you have this separation between, as you describe, as feelings and emotions. And feelings, you're referring to kind of what is arising in real time in a situation as a direct response to an active stimuli. And then you're associating emotions with something that is related more with our past experience, our emotional triggers, or our baggage, as you're calling it. Is that correct?
Exactly.
That's super interesting. Wow. Okay. And so then, how can we? So you mentioned you mentioned the idea of shifting a negative feeling to a positive feeling, and I think that this is something that can be very challenging for a lot of people. I mean, I've many times when I've been studying different spiritual paths or trying to work with meditation or something like this, and there's been so many times in my life when I've been feeling a emotional outburst or emotional facilitation and just really thought, wow, I really should be able to shift this and work with this actively right now, but nope, it's all out the window. And so do you have any insight into tools how we can achieve that shift?
Yes. So there's a couple of things that I found really, really important for this. One, if you are in an emotional state, so if some of your emotional baggage is activated, most of the time you will not be able to shift it by yourself. If you're a super advanced meditator, maybe. But for most people, what happens is that the emotional baggage that we carry around with us was created in situations that were emotionally overwhelming. So maybe like we were a little kid and our parents had a fight and they were shouting at each other. And that was emotionally overwhelming. So we couldn't feel what was happening. So we chose not to feel it and we put it into our backpack. Now, the purpose of the emotional backpack is to store that emotional energy for a later time when we're actually able to feel it. And that's why when we then encounter a similar situation, the emotional backpack is like, oh, this is great. This is an opportunity. You can actually feel this. And it comes up. So it comes up and again, you're overwhelmed. So for me, the greatest revelation was when I realized that the moment there's another person with me who has compassion, I can feel emotions that I'm not able to feel by myself. And the moment I feel them, which simply means being present with them, they heal. They move and they heal. Because an emotion is like a movement that was interrupted. Like it builds up and then like the system says, okay, this is becoming too intense. We need to stop this. So it goes into the backpack. And then the moment there's a compassion, there's like a bigger emotional capacity to feel what needs to be felt. So the movement naturally completes itself if I allow it to. And we can see this in little kids, like little kids do this naturally. They have something like they run, they fall, they hurt their knee, and then they go to mommy or daddy and they sit on the lap and they cry. And we hold them and we have compassion for them, and they naturally move through their stuff. And then comes a point when we stop doing that. And that's when our emotional baggage starts to build up. So one thing that's really important, most people try to shift it by themselves. And I tell people, don't do that. Like I tell people to start practicing with each other, to just be there for each other. No words, just a compassionate heart, just being really present. And it's like a miracle. You can shift things in 5 minutes that before, like you've been trying to shift forever and they just wouldn't shift. So that's one very, very important tool that I
Wow,
really
that
encourage
is so
people.
interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
So just so simply, the key, one key to emotional healing is just an interpersonal dynamic based on compassion.
Yes,
That's so
definitely.
simple, but it's so important because so often, as you said, we are trying to just white knuckle our experience and keeping everything bottled inside.
Yeah. And it doesn't work. And that's one of the, I think that's one of the pathologies of Western culture, that we just want to do everything by ourselves. And it's one of the gifts I find of the journey of emotional healing, that we learn we need each other. And it's actually beautiful that we need each other at that basic human level. Yeah.
That's very beautiful. Thank you. Well, please
Mhm.
continue.
So the other thing that you said, like to shift a negative emotion to a positive one, or negative feeling to a positive one, most people would associate that with like shifting from anger to joy, or sadness to joy, or fear to joy, or shame to joy. And that's not what I'm talking about. And I feel that's very important, because if we try to do that, we neglect the purpose of so-called negative feelings. So if we look at the 5 feelings I mentioned, the anger, the sadness, the shame, the fear, and the joy, you notice that 4 out of 5, most people don't want to have. Most people would consider 4 out of 5 negative, right? So if we take a closer look at why do we consider these feelings to be negative, okay, of course we can say, oh, they don't feel good. Okay, fine. But let's go deeper. Like why, what's going on? And if we go deeper, we see that these 4 feelings all show up in situations that are different than we would like them to be. So there's a gap between wish and reality. whether the feeling is anger or sadness or fear or shame, things are not the way I want them to be. And this gap is pain. This gap between wish and reality is pain. And then one of those feelings usually tries to deal with that pain. Now, joy is the only feeling that shows up when what is and what we want match. So in a way, it's very childish to only want joy. It's an attitude that says, I always want everything to be the way I want it to be. It's kind of the attitude of a 3-year-old. Because as adults, we know that life is not like that. Like sometimes the world is the way you want it to be, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes your partner is the way you want him to be, sometimes not. Like everything. And the reason why we have the so-called negative feelings is actually to address the situations that are different than we would like them to be. And those situations are more challenging than the ones that are the way we want them to be. So that's why we have 4 possible answers to those situations. We have the possible answer of anger, which in its positive expression gives us the energy to act, to be clear, to address what needs to be addressed. Or we have the possible answer of sadness, which energetically is like almost the opposite. And it like brings your energy down, like your pulse lowers and your hands drop and you move into acceptance in its positive expression. And then we have the answer of fear, which is, I don't know how to change this, but I can't just accept it. So basically fear in its positive expression is meeting the unknown. And then we have the possible answer of shame, which in its positive expression is self-reflection. Like maybe it's me, maybe I did something wrong, maybe I need to change, maybe how I'm addressing the situation is not working, maybe I caused a problem. So these are very, very different answers, and they're not just like different kind of interpretations or ways of relating to a situation, but they're also energetically different. Like they trigger different hormonal responses in our system. They do different things to our heart rate. They do different things to our consciousness, and they're actually energetic states that if appropriate to situation, we can use these energetic states and they can help us address the situation and are actually used up in the addressing of the situation. So there's nothing left in our system afterwards. Or they can get stuck in our system if the energy is not appropriate to the situation, or if it's too much, like I described earlier, and it gets stuck in our emotional backpack. Or what many people have is that they don't have the full emotional vocabulary. So they have like 2 or 3 feelings missing. They were never allowed to be angry, or they never learned to develop like mature sadness that really moves into acceptance. And then what happens is that other feelings have to take the place of these missing feelings. So you end up having the wrong feeling in situations, wrong in the sense of it's not helping you to address the situation. So maybe someone is offending you and you just feel sad, like, and it's not like a mature, compassionate sadness, but it's this victim. Oh, why is this happening to me? And you don't have a healthy anger power that says, wait a minute, stop. You're like, I don't want to be addressed like this. So this is kind of, this is like the model I use, this emotional compass, to help people understand more about, it's actually a map of emotional health, and it helps people to identify their blind spots emotionally. And the thing is, like, if you're having difficulty shifting from a negative state into a positive one, very often it's because there is a feeling missing in your compass that your system has forgotten how to produce. Or you're just stuck in the wrong feeling to the situation because it's not helping you to resolve the situation. Or it's because you're stuck in emotional baggage, and often it's a combination, just to make it really messy. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. So these 4 emotions that we would generally consider to be negative or undesirable are actually a type of fuel to engender some sort of activity or work to work through our emotional backpack, this stored trauma and baggage that we have.
Yes, like if we're on the emotional side, yes. And if we're on the feeling side, which is the one that just comes from the moment, then it's very much to engage with life. That's what the true purpose is of feelings.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really interesting. And how you describe this kind of different ways that we can have this unhealthy use or improper expression of these emotional triggers. It reminds me of a theme we have in Tibetan medicine. So in Tibetan medicine, one way we describe the basis of pathology in general is by kind of 3 different characteristics of which way a pathology can go, or which way a type of behavior can go that will create a pathology. And those would be, number 1, if an energetic expression of a physiological expression is insufficient, like it's a deficiency, not enough of something that we should have. Or number 2 would be an excess expression, too much of something driving too hard. And then number three would be, we call like disturbed or deranged, like something doing the wrong thing, not doing someone else's job or going somewhere it's not supposed to go. And so I see kind of a correlation between what you're describing. We can, maybe our expression is insufficient, or maybe our expression is overcharged, or maybe like you just said, we are just sad when we should be angry, or we have something missing from our toolbox in that sense. Does that make sense?
Totally. It matches completely, because one thing I didn't mention is how do we recognize if we're emotionally triggered? We can recognize it either because we go completely numb emotionally, and this many people are not aware of, that that's actually not a sign of emotional balance, but it's actually an emotional pathology, and very often a sign of being triggered. And some people are constantly triggered, so they just numb all the time, and it's not healthy. And the other side of the coin is like what you mentioned, an excess of expression. So people have emotional outbursts. And what I find really ironic is that these are the people who often consider themselves to be very emotional and who think that they feel a lot. But if we really go in, we notice that the excess of emotional expression is actually a strategy not to feel. It's a way of avoiding feeling, just like the numbness. Because instead of actually being with the feeling and being with the sensation, being present with it, really allowing it to be in contact with your awareness and consciousness, which is a very centered, almost meditative process, you go into this throwing it out, which is an attempt to get rid of it. And as long as we try to get rid of it, it stays. Yeah. So that's fascinating. I really see a parallel.
And would you describe that as how a lot of people these days talk about emotional buffering, or emotionally kind of, we don't want to deal with what we should be dealing with or what is happening, so we have something else to compensate and block and buffer with that. It could be, as you said, numbness, or it could be another emotional state coming in to sort of overcompensate. Would you describe that as buffering?
I haven't used that term, but I guess you could use that term. And obviously there's many other strategies. I mean, one of the biggest strategies in our societies is addictions of all sorts, I would say. And of course, those are not just substance addictions, but also behavioral addictions that are so normal, we don't even see them as pathological. And I see them as a sign of emotional ill health.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that we have in Tibetan medicine that's a very important kind of foundation theory will relate with people's sort of innate personality, their constitution, which of course relates with our theory of the 5 elements and the 3 constitutional humors and this sort of thing. But the way it might play out in this sort of conversation is somebody might really have a lifelong tendency, or a very long-term tendency, to sort of latch on to one specific type of emotional expression. Maybe somebody really goes for the angry outburst, or maybe somebody really is habituated to shutting down, more depressed in response to stress. And that would be sort of, in Tibetan medicine theory, related with not only their lifetime experience, but also their elemental constitution, their innate personality. But do you, in your work, do you feel that people will often kind of go for one extreme, or latch onto one of these kind of key emotions? And then what's up with that? What would you say?
Mm-hmm. I would say it's a combination of factors. I definitely feel or observe that we kind of have like a natural constitution or tendency, or like we call them temperaments also. Like this is from the anthroposophic work of Rudolf Steiner. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Like he talks about different temperaments as well, and they have tendencies towards particular feelings. So it could be anger or sadness, of you, like you mentioned. And then obviously how we are raised does make a big difference. And there's been some amazing research on that in recent years. How much, for example, emotional expression, even in toddlers, is really encouraged in girls and discouraged in boys, even by parents who consciously say, no, I don't make any difference between boys and girls, like I raise them the same. But to this day, like our parenting actually encourages girls to express emotionally and boys to repress emotionally. And then obviously there's a lot of conditioning about which feelings are okay for men and which feelings are okay for women. Like very often I'm asked whether it's true that men are just less emotional, or I even had people ask me, I just thought men don't have feelings, like sincerely. And obviously that's not true. I don't need to tell you that, but men are less expressive. And I feel that's largely a cultural thing. So I feel like the Constitution combines with cultural conditioning, but I guess that's obvious. I'm sure that also I grew up partly in Asia and have lived a lot of my life in Asia. I know there it's very different what is culturally appropriate in emotional expression, and I can imagine in Tibet it's also very different.
Oh, absolutely. The cultural aspect is so important. And if you can't step outside of the cultural paradigm, then you oftentimes will really not even realize at all the extent to the to your cultural conditioning. Definitely. Well, this is fascinating. This is really, really great, Vivian. So I'd like to move and talk with our host, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, for a little while. And I was wondering, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the Tibetan medicine theory and presentation of emotions and expression and health. And then can we circle back and if you are in the mood, I would love to hear some more about this emotional compass theory, and just kind of maybe you can present and we can dive into that a little bit.
Sure.
But first, let's talk a little bit with Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. And Vivian, thank you so much for sharing so far. It's so awesome. So Menpa Wangmo, hello, how are you doing?
Yes, thank you. I'm doing well.
So, and it's wintertime where you are in Western Massachusetts. And so probably you guys are having some snow and chopping firewood as well.
Yes, but this year is we had a very mild winter, so far is very beautiful. So
Well,
far so beautiful. Yeah, like today we had a big sunshine, so we have very good weather this year.
oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, anyone who's been to our school campus in the rural Western Massachusetts knows it's extremely beautiful. So
Yeah.
well, Menpo Wangmo, can you tell us a little bit about? So we've been discussing emotional health and some of the healthy ways to express emotion, and kind of the mechanical characteristics of the energy of our feelings, and then what this relates to, and then how we can work with that to be more healthy. So in traditional Tibetan medicine, we have our 5 element system, and then the 5 elements combine universally to our human physiology into 3 divisions, which we call the 3 elemental humors, or the Nyepa Sum. And that kind of is the foundation of all of our theory about how human health works and what it's all about. So can you please share with us a little bit about, what is the nature of our emotions in terms of Tibetan medicine? And then where does this come from, and what should we do about it? Can you get the ball rolling there, please?
Thank you. Yeah. First, I want to say thank you. It's such an interest, such a great learns, hears from the Vivian. So it's great. So I want to say thank you. And then yes, that the Tibetan medicine, it's the emotion and then physical, sort of like these two is sort of like independent. One is not happy, the other one is feels. The other one's not happy, the other one feel. So as Adanda, you said, like the three nyepa, which is that the based on the 5 elements, simply like 5 elements. So this our 5 element body is some point is the sources of the sufferings. So we have this such a wonderful human life or whatever the being's life. But in the meantime, also we suffers it a lot. Some point. Sometimes we physical suffering, sometimes we mental sufferings, sometimes we energy suffering. So somehow is we suffering a lot, sort of like. Even though is physical is also source of the joy, source of the happy, source of the achievement, but meantime brings a lot of sufferings. So the number one, I think, is that we need to understand this, our wonderful physical body is also can be a source of the suffering. So if we know that, if we're expecting that since the beginning, I think that also help us to be aware to the diet behave and then so on and so forth. So this is sort of like a number one, sort of like that where we comes. Then when we looking this, the once we learned, okay, this body, energy, mind is at the moment is very happy, healthy, more or less what I wanted, what I wished. But sooner or later, this going to make can be sort of like source of the suffering. So for that reason, I need to pay attention. An example like a Western hospital, now you are a certain age, you need to go to check every year. So this is also, they know the body will bring something sufferings before to reach that, and then we do checkup. So now when we have like the sufferings, an example like angers, depressions, anxieties, fears, oops, yeah, fears, or losing confidence, all those kind of like emotionally we appears. What that means when we have like anger without any reasons, angers, short tempers, and sometimes the anger wants to attack or to the outside, or sometimes is attacking self. So this kind of time is what happened in our body. The among the five element, the fire element, or in the three nyepa we call the tipa, which is related into our fire element. That tipa element or the fire element is access. Because when we have fire, an example, when we're cooking food, if our fire is too strong, can burn everything. If the worst case can burn whole house. So for that reason, we keep extinguish fire things in the kitchen. Why we do that? Because fire, there is a chance to over sort of like become like out of control. Same like that way in our body, the fire element became access. Then we will have these kind of things, strong anger, strong sort of like a arrogant, extremely arrogant, always think I am something. So all those kind of where they're coming is that access of the fire element. Opposite of that, if the divisions of the fire element, then what happened? The divisions of the fire element, then we get sort of like fear, no confidence, lost like self-confidence. Then always we think is I'm not good something. I'm not beauty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not, this enough. So then we think everything's I'm not enough, which means is I'm making myself something not enough, which means is fear. And then that fear is small, minor cases, is may not that visible issue, big issue, But if there comes like a big problem, like the accumulate, sort of like become bigger, then sometimes we don't want to get out of the house because it's fear. I'm not good, so everybody attacking me, everybody looking me. And then if I say something, there will be shame because people will laughing to me. So this kind of, when we get these kind of stages or this kind of like the feelings, what happened in our body? The fire element is deficiency. Meantime, also that can cause our memory is slow, also to learning, sort of like the memory is not sharp, cognitive is not sharp. All those kind of like the fire element is imbalanced, is like deficiency. Same thing also our wind element. If the wind element is access, again we will have a lot of like anxieties. All those anxieties is connect to the imbalance of our wind element in our body. So if the wind is access, we have like our mind became like a monkey mind, unstable, moving lot, thinking lot. So which we call is like restless. Even you have the time to relax, but your mind is not going to relax because is that the result of your access of the wind. Meantime, also you became sort of like very unstable physically, unstable mind energy, and also a result of those things. Also, we will have sort of like a difficult sleep, which you call the insomnia. So those kind of things probably will lead. Opposite of that, if we have like the divisions of the wind element or the lung, nearby of the lung, then what happened? Again, then we tired. Then even you sleep like 14, 15 hours, wake up still tired. So do not have any motivations to move physically or energy or the emotionally. Completely became sort of like lazy. It does not mean is that person trying to bad way too lazy. No, but is the energy aspect is not working. Same also like earth element. If the earth element is access, it's the same as like that the deficiency of the wind element or the fire element. If the access of the earth element, the divisions of the earth element, then same as like the access of the wind or the fire element. So if the like divisions of the earth element, what do we have? Again, as we have like unstable physically, mentally, and also brings a lot of like fears, untrust things. So all those kind of things is connect to this the fire element. I mean this the five element. So once we know that, an example, if someone doing something strange, either your family members or your colleagues or your communities, they're doing that. What we need to understand as family, as friend, as colleagues, as a society, what we need to understand is we need to get like a compassion to that person. Say, I'm so sorry, he or she is suffering. Isn't they're not doing like a purpose way, attacking you or harming themselves, but is there something going on inside their mind, inside their body? So this is we need to understand is important. So this five element is does not mean always they do negative results. No. Five element is that the sources of our body materials. In the Tibetan medicine, we say like it druwe ludin jungwe shile trup nyebyo nejan jung the soje nejan jungwe shi nyebyo meja jungshi ngo ni lune nyebo tangi chikto drill. So our body is composed by five elements. Also, when we have the disease or when we feel unhappy or uncomfortable, also what happened, this the five element is imbalanced. later try to fixing back those elements. Also, we need to do through the 5 elements. For that reason, the body, disease, and antidotes are same element. So this is sort of like that what the Tibetan medicine understands of the emotions. So when we feel certain like a unexpected emotions, expected or what we wanted is happy. So why we have happy, healthy? Because all the element is balanced time. Why we have unhappy, angry, short tempers, aggressive, fears, jealousy, so on and so forth. Why we have that? Also, that the inner our 5 element somehow imbalance. So this is the Tibetan medicine, more or less what we're talking.
Thank you so much. Wow. So, and it's so interesting how you explain the characteristics when these elements, these nyepa, these 5 elements are, it's all this kind of dynamic together making this balance. So as you explained, if if one goes down too deficient, then the other will arise. So if one element is deficient, the pathology or the emotional symptoms might match the other one coming up because they're
Yes,
quite interrelated. It's so
yes,
fascinating.
yeah. Because it's that we say like that the when we're looking at the 5 elements, they sort of like a character side then. So like that the earth is to make the stabilities, stables, heavy. Chui Len is the water element to make everything like the cohesive systems and then also like wet, smooth. The fire element gives the heat to develop and then regenerate, like the heat. And then the wind element to moves everything, and the space gives to the room. So then one of them imbalance, then the other one also affect meantime, yes.
Thank you so much, Yanlam. And then, so as you were describing, it sounds to me like you would agree with what Ms. Dittmar explained, that one very important aspect for our emotional wellness is this interpersonals and having the compassion with other people together.
Yes, yes, it is sort of like also at Vivian before she said also there also certain like it that the if you have certain degrees like a backpack, if you put a lot of things on the backpack and then one day it's become very heavy, so then that can broke, maybe that broke the bags or broke the handles or broke something if you put another one heavy or something, no. In the Tibetan medicine what we say is accumulate, accumulate at certain cases arise, and then if the arising time we know, accumulating time, the bad part is when the accumulating time we're not aware enough, because it's still putting, I mean the you put when we travel time we put a lot of things in our suitcase, then get to the to the checking place, then we need to pay, no. Same like that way we did not know what we're putting and how heavy it is, so till put on the scale we do not know how much we put inside there. So this is my own experience. So so the same like that way when we're putting a lot of things in the backpack time, till to get on the scale we are not aware enough. The arising time, which means is put on the scale, arise, it goes up, then we find out. So this is sort of like arising time. Then once the arise time, then we looking for a antidote. So this is the then we could try to find a method to pacifying. So
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's so cool. That I totally agree, and I didn't even think of that at all. But what Vivian was explaining about, something from your backpack coming out at in response to the stimulation, that is just as you said. That's quite comparable to the Tibetan medicine theory of accumulation of pathology and then arising. And then, as you said, in order to pacify, all of these things are all rooted in the 5 elements. So
Yes.
very cool.
Yes.
Menpa Wangmo, I had a follow-up question. So you were explaining some of this when we have the imbalanced characteristics of these 5 elements, or 3 nyepa, and then we have emotional response: anger, fear, depression, laziness. So can you just explain? I know that when we have a balanced, our 3 nyepa, or 5 elements balanced and a healthy expression, then there's also a healthy expression emotionally of these 5 elements. Can you just tell us a little bit, like, what is like the healthy, proper expression of the emotionally of the fire and the wind and the earth and water?
Thank you. Yeah. So as I said before, the 5 element can causing a lot of pain physically and mentally, but also they do a lot of good jobs. Like an example, when we're looking like a fire element, the fire element is that when we eat food, who's digesting all those food is the fire element, like a metabolic heat or digestive heat, whatever we call. Once they digested food, and then all our bodily tissues like muscles, fat, bones, bone marrow, reproductive fluid, so on and so forth, who's making regenerating is the fire element. Who's making all those our body complexions is the fire element. Who's making us like smart, easy to understand, a good energy, determined, self-confident? It's a fire element. So all those sort of like that, the fire element. Also, Abhidhamma Kosha, they said, no, "Tseni chöyin." So what is alive? What is the meaning of alive? Alive means is your consciousness still be with heat. At that time is we alive. Once our body completely lost heat, means is all the body system is shut down. Then what the doctor pronounce is something else, is not alive. So that the fire element is that important. Even when we're looking like the visions, so that the vision, power of the vision is we connect to the fire element. So these kind of like that the fire element, when we looking, there's a lot of big benefits. Also, when we're looking like earth element, the earth element is like the presenting all our body, like the like structures of our body, like muscles, bones, all those sort of like that they connect to the earth element. Emotionally, also to make all the stables, calm, peace, stables, and then like judging, not like judging good or bad, other people's business, no, but is judging, should I do, should not do, sort of like to give it time or ability to analyze. All those kind of thing is that the earth element. And the same thing also that the wind element, all our inhaling breathings, exhaling breath, all the circulations, movement, thoughts, memories, all those kind of like that the most like a movement, physically, mentally, energy aspect is that the wind element. And then the water element is similar with the earth element to give the heaviness, stableness, but the meantime is like to keep all the body is like soft, smooth, all the liquid lubrication is connected to the earth element. So today's our talking like a 5 element is rough aspects we're talking. But when we go to more subtle aspects, also the 5 element is like rough element, subtle element, more subtle element. 5 element could relate to the physical body. 5 element could relate to the inner energies and also more subtle energies. So rough we can touch. More subtle we cannot touch, but we feel. And the more subtle even we cannot feel. So this kind of 5 element. But other hand, also when we're looking at each element, like fire element, when we're looking fire element, we have like 7 characteristics of the 5 elements. I mean, there's the fire element. Same like that, we also in the water element, we have 6 characteristics of the water element, 6 characteristics for the earth element, and then 6 characteristics for the wind element. So these can also, each element, we have many different, like the characters. I think when we're looking like a Western medicine, like when we look in the blood, there's many types of the blood. Inside the blood, there's many cells. So this kind of like that, the 5 element. So this is sort of like that, the 5 element of what they're doing. So this is sort of like the good aspects, the functions of the element. If those elements imbalance time, then as we said before, so will bring all those sort of like negative effects. So this, when we're looking sort of like that Gunjung, when we're looking sort of like Four Noble Truths, this is sort of like that everything good can cause to the suffering. So everything like changeable, no? Everything is like today's good, tomorrow something happened, then it's bad. So this kind of sort of like this also like the telling that the impermanence, everything sort of like can turn into the another one stages. So now what we need to know, okay, we know the suffering is something not good, which I don't like. If I have fear, I don't like. If I'm angry, I don't like. If I have depression, so on and so forth, also I don't like. So now what do we need to do? Also, I learned where those sources of all those kind of things coming from my existed element imbalanced. So now we know that also. Now what we need to look for, how to prevent that. So that is then sort of like that the next topic or whatever is like that how we try to prevent from that. So that is that in the Four Noble Truths, sort of like that the Gogvedemba, like a truth of the blocking, truth of the preventing. So this also like a Tibetan medicine, when we're studying that the Tibetan medicine, we say minawa never chow the now so which it so if you want to be healthy, if you want to promote health to the other beings, you should study medicine. So medicine means is like a benefit. You need to know this wonderful body one day can be also to causing you the sufferings. If you have suffering, what happened? You need to know you should not blame he or she made me these sufferings, because suffering I didn't buy from the market. Sufferings I didn't get like as gift. So suffering, what happened within my something happened. So is suffering is related with me. So sort of like I caused my suffering. So now what I need to know, how I can prevent that sufferings. So then that could do through the diet, through the behavior, through medicine, through the external therapies. But that the medicine external therapy is maybe we need someone like expert, but is the diet and the behavior something in our hand, you know? So then these two is more important. So you want me to tell that or later? So you tell me. I don't want to take a lot of time.
Thank you, Menpa Wangpo. Yeah. I think, wow. Yeah, I think maybe we'll do it. We're diving into the emotional prevention. Maybe we'll say a word at the end,
Yeah.
but it's so many methods of treatment to talk about. But as you mentioned, our general categories, we're maintaining our health with the diet, lifestyle, medicines, and therapeutics. So thank you so much for all of that. And I really appreciate that you mentioned this Four Noble Truths, and you mentioned this very ubiquitous Dharma idea of impermanence. It reminded me, I was thinking about the concept, the idea of impermanence when Vivian was talking many times, because Vivian was explaining that, out of these kind of 5 primary feelings, then only joy is a time when we feel satisfied, when what we want to happen and what is really happening is corresponding. All the other times is we're trying to work with something, trying to get somewhere, trying to change something. And this, I feel, is very pertinent with the Buddhist concept of impermanence, where it's like everything is changing, everything can be unstable, and it's very easy to have many times where we're not feeling like everything is perfectly coordinated. But then to get to that point and be joyful no matter what's happening, that's kind of the wisdom aspect. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's fascinating, Menpa Wangmo, the 5 elemental characteristics. And we talk about health in the 5 elements. So often we're talking about our physical health, digestion, physical capacity, our liver, our respiratory health, this sort of thing. But as you were clarified, there's also this mental emotional aspect to all of these elements, and it's so important. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Ms. Dittmar, can we come back to you now and talk a little bit more?
Sure.
And earlier we were saying that that you have this this idea that you have worked on, this kind of presentation of the emotional compass and these divisions of this kind of categories of primary feelings and emotions working together in sort of this this mandala, or this sort of compass to guide our way. And I think it's such a fascinating idea. Do you have time to tell us a little bit about that system?
Sure. Would I be able to share a graphic? Like, is that available?
Oh, please do. Yeah, you're welcome to share your screen anytime. Thank you so much.
I think I need a permission for that from the host, whoever that is.
Yes, let's see. We can, I think Matthew can click that, or maybe I can click really quickly.
There.
There we
Great.
go.
So I just have a simple
Nice.
graphic here that I would like to show. And interestingly enough, I didn't mention this before, but it also relates to 5 elements. It's not exactly the same. And this was one thing I was curious about, because I was told about this aspect of Tibetan medicine. So yes, there is, in the emotional compass, we have the 5 feelings related to 5 elements. So anger is fire. We agree on that. It's pretty obvious. So let's start with that at the bottom. Now in the kind of quotation marks, you see the word wrong. What that means is that that's the mental, like that's the thought that triggers anger. So if you say this is wrong, like me coming home and the dishes are not done, the conscious or subconscious thought that will produce anger is this is wrong. Now, you see above that, you see the words clarity versus destruction. What that means is that if I'm in a mature, healthy state of anger, then that anger will be appropriate to the situation, and it will enable me to be clear in what I want and how I want to address this. And as I mentioned before, the fire that is produced will not be in excess. And I will not have to like stuff it away or throw it out. And I can simply use it to take care of the situation, whether that's talking to my husband or doing the dishes or both. Now, the destruction expression we haven't talked about so much, that's like the shadow expression. So I mentioned that each feeling has a shadow expression. And many people, especially when we talk about anger, fear, sadness, and shame, only know the shadow expression of that particular feeling. But with anger, it's pretty obvious. It can be very destructive. I can really be violent, or I can be emotionally aggressive, abusive, and destroy relationships. I can take it in words, like Wangmo mentioned, and I can destroy myself. So it can be a very destructive force, just like fire. And it's a great energy for situations that I can actually change, that I can actually do something about, where I can be active. But in situations where I cannot actively do something to change them, where that's not within my power, anger is not the appropriate energy. It's just going to burn me up. So in that case, we can move along the compass to the next feeling, which is sadness. And we shift into a very different energy. And I associate that with water, because water has that flowing quality and it rinses us, and it's like a river. It allows us to let go and the water will carry it away. And it's actually also cleansing. So again, we have in the quotation marks, we have unfortunate. So if we say, okay, this is unfortunate, what a pity, then I go into sadness, which in its healthy expression will move me towards acceptance. In its shadow expression will move me into passivity, resignation, disengagement, victim mentality. So it's a kind of negative, not engaging with what's happening, not opening my heart and really accepting what's happening, but just not wanting to connect with it. So sadness is really the appropriate feeling for situations that I cannot change and that I need to accept, like the death of a loved one, or like a pandemic and a lockdown. I cannot immediately do something about it. I need to accept. Many of us have had to let go of a lot of plans we had and a lot of projects we had, a lot of activities we enjoyed. So there, sadness can help us to move to a place of acceptance and peace and calm with that which we cannot change. And now let's jump to the other side, because there we have fear. Now, like I mentioned before, anger is great if you can actually do something about it. Sadness is really good if it's about accepting that which you cannot change. But then there's situations that you can neither change nor accept. And those are the situations where fear is actually appropriate. And most people are really surprised when I suggest that fear can also be something positive. For most people, fear is only negative. And that is because most people only know the shadow expression of fear, which is very often paralysis. And they just don't, they basically associate fear with danger. They equate fear with danger. But if you really look at how fear evolved, you understand that it would be way too dangerous if fear would only show up in the case of danger. So what actually happens is fear shows up whenever we meet the unknown. And that unknown can be dangerous. It can also be an amazing opportunity. Now, with the pandemic, a lot of people have been going through a lot of fear. Like in the beginning, last March, most of my work concentrated on helping people dealing with the fear. And I also have created a meditation that's still available on YouTube about accessing the power of fear for anyone who's interested. So that actually guides people through a process of shifting from paralysis to what I call creativity, which is the essence of really meeting the unknown, is really tapping into our potential and like, okay, so what's going to happen now? And fear in its positive expression makes us very alert, very awake, and it brings out abilities in us that we normally don't have access to. And the interpretation, again in quotation marks, is this is terrible. Like that's what triggers fear in the system, the conscious or unconscious thought. And I actually associate fear with the element earth because it's so much about limitation and boundaries. So then we have the fourth feeling that is reaching outwards. And the reason why these four feelings reach outwards is because they relate outwards. And the fifth feeling in the center relates to ourselves. And I'll get to that in a moment. So the next feeling, of course, is our favorite feeling, joy. And the interpretation that triggers it is this is right or this is beautiful. And I love what you mentioned earlier, how you were referring to my very like childish definition of joy. Joy is when I get what I want. Now, of course, as we mature, we develop a deeper ability for joy, and we can develop what sometimes is called unconditional joy. And that can even be the joy in a healthy anger. It can be the joy in a healthy fear, the joy in a healthy sadness, the joy in whatever is happening in this impermanence and this constant change. So that's a different level of joy. But most people, my observation in our culture is, are really struggling with the lack of joy because of the lack of appreciation. So that's why, that's what I have here as the light aspect. Appreciation really means that we take the time to stop and notice everything that's good in our lives, in each moment, everything that's beautiful, everything we can be grateful for. And every time we do that, we produce joy in our system. We strengthen joy in our system. Now, I associate joy with the air element because it's so light. And the shadow aspect, and this is something that surprises most people, that also joy has a shadow expression. The shadow aspect of joy I call illusion. And this is where we pretend that things are great. We pretend that there is no gap between what we would like and what is. We just brush it over and we say, oh yeah, sure, I have a great marriage. Well, actually not, yeah. Or you're saying, everything's fine, everything's good, I'm doing great. And underneath, there's issues, there's needs that are not addressed, there's other emotions, and there's situations that might need one of the other feelings, if we were really honest. And so that's the shadow expression of joy. So finally, let's move into the center, to the fifth and last feeling, the feeling of shame, which I associate with the element of ether, kind of pervades everything. And I associate that with shame because shame, at least in the Western culture, is very much associated with, you could say, the birth of the ego. Like in the Bible, there's that moment when Adam and Eve eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge, and suddenly they look down on themselves, and for the first time they notice they're naked. So they're, for the first time, mankind is looking at himself, man and woman, looking at herself. And the first thing is that they were ashamed. So that's the birth. It's like a step in consciousness that happened with this judgment of good and bad, and also the birth of the ego, of the self. And that's really what shame is about. It's that look in the mirror. When we experience shame, we are intensely aware of ourselves, and we notice our flaws, like they're magnified. And in its healthy expression, that allows us to engage with our flaws in a mature way. And we can look at ourselves and we can say, oh yeah, those are aspects of myself that maybe I would like them to be different. And maybe then I work on changing them. So that's a way of relating with them through anger. Yeah, I might say, okay, I really need to have the discipline to improve my diet, to exercise, to maintain my health, like what you were talking about, which is so important. And sometimes we need anger power for that in a healthy way. Or maybe I need to move into sadness and say, oh, wow, I really wish I wasn't so impatient. But I noticed this is a part of me that I've been trying to change for so long. And at this point, I just need to embrace that I'm impatient. And so that's a very, it's very much about being in a relationship with ourselves. Now, most people only know shame and its shadow expression, which is self-abasement, where we just bash ourselves, and we are not kind towards ourselves. We just criticize ourselves and we put ourselves down, and that's the shadow expression of shame. And what I find really interesting is very much like what we heard from Tibetan medicine. Also in this model, it's very much about a balance. So it doesn't mean that you have to have an equal amount of these feelings in your experience, but it's like energies that you need to have available in your system so that you can respond to situations appropriately. And then you don't end up with the wrong feeling at the wrong time, in the wrong intensity, etc., which is a sign of imbalance. And maybe just to complete, one of the things that I find really helpful about the model, like I mentioned earlier, is like it helps people identify blind spots. And until people know the model, oftentimes they don't think that a lack of anger is a problem. Like often people come to me and say, you know, I have so much shame, for example, like I suffer from so much shame and I go on and on criticizing myself. And they're not aware that the excess of shame is caused by a lack of anger. Because, for example, someone goes and offends them, and rather than saying, wait a minute, like, I don't like you talking to me in this way and setting a healthy boundary, the person takes it into themselves and say, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Why is he talking to me like that? Just as a simple example. So that's a very, very common kind of like a misplaced, like the wrong feeling at the wrong time. And so what's really helpful for people, and this is maybe for anyone watching, a little homework, check out, you know, which of these feelings is missing in your compass? Which of these do you only know in a shadow expression? And how could the lacking feeling be related to other feelings that you might have in excess? And what you will find is that if you address the lack, the excess will correct itself, because you will no longer need to have shame in situations that might need to be addressed with another feeling. So that I found a fascinating parallel, that it's very much about balance and they are very much connected. So thank you so much for allowing me to share this. I would stop the screen sharing, or you want to keep looking at it?
Oh, yeah, I think you can come back now. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Awesome. Thank you, Vivian, so much. It's really quite beautiful and interesting, this material. And I love, once again, as you just mentioned, this kind of parallel. I think anytime we're working, many systems are working with these kind of an elemental theme or an elemental spectrum. And if you study elemental medicine in any way, you quickly see that this is mirroring natural systems. This is kind of deriving wisdom for insights for our own health based on just this kind of analysis of the natural world around us. And one thing that always comes from that very quickly is this idea of balance. And so I really appreciate in your system how, as you just explained, one emotion being deficient can be balanced by the dynamic with its opposing or a neighboring emotion. And so, as Menpa Wangmo said, you know, the cause of health or disease, and then the expression of health or disease, and the solution of a disease all come from the 5 elements. So it's kind of all inclusive in this mandala, in this system, where all the tools we need and everything we're working with are here together. So I really appreciate that about your system that you've presented. Also, another thing that really came to mind in your presentation that I really appreciate is how you refer to this kind of negative or pathological expression of the emotions as a shadow expression. Because what does a shadow mean? The shadow means something that is kind of behind the real thing that's really presenting, and then something behind that or secondary to that can be this shadow. And so that means, if that's true, that means that our emotions primarily and fundamentally are an expression of health and are serving, you described like an evolutionary function to protect us, to help us. So I really appreciate that aspect as well, how our emotions fundamentally are a healthy part of our dimension, and then they can have this unhealthy will be a secondary effect. So thank you so much for sharing your system. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
So we have a few minutes left. And so in this conversation, is there anything else that comes up that you feel would be pertinent to share on this topic as far as we've come so far?
Actually, there is one aspect that I feel would be interesting to mention, and it's a bit challenging. So I think we can just touch upon it, but I think it would be quite interesting, especially in the context of the Tibetan medicine and the context of the Tibetan Buddhist culture. I would be interested to talk about it. What I noticed is, you talked in the beginning, you talked about how challenging it can be to shift from a negative expression to a positive. And I also mentioned that this is something many people are not able to do. And I think the reason why we're not able to do that, it has to do with our ego structure. So what happens if we look closely at what causes a negative expression? So I've used the example of anger a lot, so I'm going to go back to that. Anger in its negative expression is destructive. So what's the root of that? The root of that is whenever there is a belief, usually it's unconscious, that my interpretation that this is wrong is not a personal, impermanent interpretation arising out of the moment, but that it is absolute, that it is an absolute truth, so that this is absolutely wrong. So coming back to my dish example, I come home, the dishes are not done. And if I interpret that to be absolutely wrong, and I deem myself absolutely right in that interpretation, then I create, you could say, an ego-driven anger. And the same goes for all the other feelings. And what happens then, I find this quite fascinating, is that the anger goes against what is. And this is why it becomes destructive. And the same thing goes for the shadow expression of sadness or fear or of joy, actually, or of shame. So it's always a refusal to connect with and engage with what is. So a positive expression, a mature expression of anger, like I said, is clarity, is action. That is actually an engagement with what is. So prior to that, there's an acceptance of what is. And the shadow expression is always a disengagement. It's a belief that I'm absolutely right in how I see this, and there's no other way about it. And there's been a lot of this. I mean, we've talked a lot about polarization recently. We've seen a lot of this, especially in the US. And the sense of being absolutely right about something is deeply gratifying to the ego, and it causes tremendous suffering. And I believe also it causes tremendous ill health. So that's like a deeper level of the model that normally I wouldn't go into in a context like this. But if we have a context of like a Buddhist context, I feel like that's something we can also address, because there's a deeper understanding of certain aspects of the psyche that many people are not aware of. Like, many people often get very confused initially when I bring this up, but I did feel like it has a place here, because if we really look at emotional healing, I notice this is really key, finding that place where I'm hooked and I'm not willing to let go, because this feeling of being absolutely right, and he should have done the dishes because he said he would do the dishes, like that's where I'm hooked. And that's where I create suffering, and that's where I create shadow expressions of emotions and all of that. So yeah, that's something I wanted to still offer.
Right. Thank you so much. Yes. So where we're going to get hooked and obstructed and then produce these shadow expressions is where we're going to have a conceptual idea, a concept. In Buddhism, I think we talk a lot about concepts being problematic. And so we have an idea where we feel we're absolutely has to be this way, one way, or it's, this kind of ultimatum, and then we get stuck there and we can't progress. I think that's a really important point. Thank you so much.
Yes. So there's another parallel. That's fascinating. Yeah. So you call them concepts. Yeah. I call them absolutes.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's really profound. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Well, let's go one more time in closing. Menpa Wangmo, anything else you'd like to add before we finish on this topic?
Thank you. It's really nice. Um, yeah, I think it's what I want to do, sort of like a conclusion of the topic is when we are healthy, happy, everything is good. That moment when we're enjoying time, that is the time to be aware to the health, and then to the relationships, to the environment, to the whatever you are in your society, which means is be careful with the diet, behave so on and so forth, because everything impermanent could change into another one. So this is one thing. Does not mean is okay, I'm happy time you need to visualizing unhappy. No, I'm not talking that. But is you need to think is that is good. I have good experience, so I want to keep this experience a little longer as much as possible. So careful with the diet, behave, so on and so forth. Special environment, not diet, behave, or care yourself, but also care other beings, other lives, included environment, everything. Once you have something problems, and then there are also two things. One is the fixable, one is unfixable. So impermanent is good parts of the impermanent is if the bad experience could change to the good experience. Like if you sick, go to doctor, they able to fix. So it's changeable. So may not you need to worry so much. And then there's certain things we may not able to change certain circumstance. Like this year, we locked down. We don't like to be locked down, but it is locked down. So just accept that inside that you try to find another one solution to be happy, healthy. So as Shandideva said, Ketichoso Yonane telemega chajigu, Ketichoso menane telemega chejipen. So if there's something problem, can fix, why you worry about? Go and fix, that's it. If there is a problem, nothing to do, and then why you worry about that? You just accept that and be there. Because is sometimes it's I see people and then they say, oh, the doctor gave me 5 years life, and then worry now. Yeah, it is bad news that I know. But before that 5 years, many things can happen. Maybe by the end of the fourth year, they find a new medicine because everything is changing. So this kind of, if they're not necessary, don't worry so much. This is one thing. And then how to fixing aspects, as we said it before, like once we know the sufferings, once we know the sources of the sufferings, and then the fixing aspect is mainly the diet behave. So today we don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to talk. But it's one of the main important things. You try to fixing your tension. So your attention is looks like that the sources to bring all the problems. So that is through the Dharma, could be through the teaching, could be through the meditation, could be, which one helps you. So just if you listen like teachings from the His Holiness, it is a like huge a medicine. So that is one thing I think is the important part. Once you found a method to prevent or to help, how long you should do that? Probably you need to do rest of the life. If you find a good meditation to keep you happy, healthy, and then should I do one time, 1 month, and maybe you do longer because that is the compass. So if you're carrying that in your life, and that helps to maintain. So this is Tibetan medicine. We said there is one call is that the gunju, like the daily behave. So the certain daily behave is starting from the birth till to the end of the breathing. And until that point, ideally you have to do. Otherwise, it may not work. So these kind of things I want to say. So yeah, again, I want to say thank you for everybody. And a special thank you, Vivian. Such a wonderful talk. And also thank you, Tim. And then I want to say one thing, upcoming one special webinar going to be on the 10th January, no, February, because the 12th February is a Tibetan New Year, which is we call the Losar. 2 days before the Losar, which is the 29th of the Tibetan calendar, the 12th month, and then we will make a special soup. That soup is sort of like the symbolic of the reunion, the families, and then also the soup sort of like it to check in the next year how it's going to be. So in our community we call the divination soup. So I will do this soup, help to making the soup through the Zoom, because they used to usually we get together and then we have soup together, but this year we cannot be together. So also it's a good opportunity so we can share more other people's. So I will teach how to make the soup. And also I will explain what is that the Tibetan losar, why we make that soup, what the meaning of this soup. And then in the soup, we need a certain ingredient, why we need this kind of. So I will talk a little bit about the Tibetan culture based on this Tibetan losar. So that webinar going to be on the 10th February, which is Wednesday. So that I want to say, I hope you able to participate. So that I want to say to the listeners, followers.
Thank you so much, Menpa Wangmo, and thank you for sharing everything you shared with us today. Yes, and everybody, please do keep in touch. We will be sending announcements out for this celebration online of Tibetan New Year with our, and Menpa Wangmo will teach us about the divination soup, which is a really just very special, enjoyable part of this celebration. I think you'll really, really like it. Thank you so much, Menpa Wangmo. And Vivian Ditmar, thank you so much for joining us today. So everybody, everybody at home, I highly recommend you check out Ms. Ditmar's content and her work. You can definitely download or purchase her books, The Power of Feelings, Practical Guide to Emotional Intelligence, and also Your Inner GPS, Finding Clarity with the 5 Disciplines of Thought. And Ms. Ditmar also mentioned that she has some guided meditations and other content on YouTube. And I think that you can also catch her presenting on various other podcasts and webinars and seminars, because she stays quite busy offering content for the benefit of everybody. Ms. Ditmar, is there any other upcoming events that you want to let people know about, or any other ways that they should contact you if they want to learn more?
Sure. So most of my work is currently still in German and other languages. So the Inner GPS actually will be released sometime this year. The next English-speaking event I will be speaking at is the Integral European Conference, which will be online this year. So that'll be very exciting. I'll do a 90-minute presentation, which allows us to go deep. The topic will be announced soon. And otherwise, yes, there's an English language newsletter. You can find that on my website, viviandittmar.com. So please sign up for the newsletter to stay tuned for further releases and upcoming events if you resonate with what I have to share. And I just want to express my gratitude for this meeting we had. I learned a lot. I was really grateful to have this opportunity to learn more about Tibetan medicine, and like what you shared really resonated with me. And I'm just really grateful also for this reminder of also the beauty of impermanence. That's something that really got me on a new level, how seeing the beauty of impermanence can really help us to appreciate the good moments and also embrace the challenging moments. And I'm very grateful for that, and wish you a lot of joy and success in sharing this work. And I'm very grateful you're doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivian. We really appreciate you having with us. And yes, I really ask you to please produce as much content in English as possible, because as you've seen in the news here in the United States, we could use some more insights and wisdom. So thank you so much. We wish you the best and many blessings. And I hope we have the chance to talk with you again next time.
Yeah.
And
Love that.
yes.
Thank you.
Everybody at home, thank you for joining us. This is the Shangshung School of Tibetan Medicine ongoing webinar series. I'm Adam Okerblom, and many blessings to everybody, and we will see you next time.